I have the pleasure of introducing James Jensen today. And first off, I want to thank everybody for being here. So James Jensen is an entrepreneur. He's committed to working with leading-edge technology, and he's eager to solve problems surrounding how we interact and engage with each other in physical and virtual worlds. He's the previous creator and co-founder of the world-renowned virtual reality company, The Void. Many of you have probably been or experienced The Void. How many of you guys have actually been to The Void or been through it? Okay, pretty amazing experience. Within the last 25 years, James founded and managed several technology companies in video streaming, social networks, mobile games, and creative services. He's partnered with Disney, Sony, Fox, MGM, Intel, Microsoft, Sci-Fi, DreamWorks, MTV, through many of the ventures he's worked on. And he's now launching a new form of virtual reality that they were referring to as hyper reality, in the form of a multi-sensory entertainment company called Jump. And Jump will allow people to come as close to jumping and flying as the real thing, but without all the risk. So without further ado, we'll invite James to the stage. So thank you so much for being here. Can we get a round of applause? So,
thanks for having me.
yeah, for sure. We're very grateful you're here.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to do is just have you tell us a little bit about Jump. I know we have a little video we wanted to show, but why don't you give us a little brief synopsis on Jump, and then we'll show the video.
Absolutely. Jump is multifaceted, but to boil it down, I like to tell people or ask people if they've ever had a dream of flying. And most people are like, absolutely, I always have dreams of flying. And then they tell me this awesome dream that they've had. And so like as a base, that was one of the motivations, one of the core motivations of what Jump is when I created The Void, I recognized something that was happening inside of the experience because I did The Void mostly because it was an entertainment concept. I came from movie making and computer animation and visual effects, and I saw people on green screens that were being composited into these imaginated worlds that were so cool and so awesome. I was like, I want to be inside the computer. And I did the Void for entertainment base, but a byproduct of what happened with The Void is what really fascinated me, and it was this experience that people were having when they went into a virtual reality simulation that felt very real to them. When they came out, they kind of questioned their reality after that. They were open to new possibilities. We always had this saying that adults went in one side and kids came out the other side. Like I would see Paul Allen and like Larry Page and these guys on one side, adults with like bodyguards, and on the other side there were 16, 17-year-old kids, and their minds were open again. I was like, wow, that's something that I didn't expect. One of my favorite things was to walk or to go to my locations and sit at the exits and watch people come out and see the reactions. It was really fun.
Love that.
Yeah. So Jump is a hyper-realistic wingsuit and base jumping experience that people can experience these crazy things that these guys do that train for many years and risk their lives to jump and fly these amazing places in the world. And we've basically made a replica of that in a virtual sense for people, anybody to experience.
That's truly incredible. In fact, do you mind, we're going to take a pause, and can we cue the video? We'll give everybody an opportunity to kind of experience in a 2D way.
If you could jump off a cliff with zero risk, would you do it? Yeah, me too. Introducing Jump, the world's first wingsuit simulator. This hyper-real experience gives you the thrill of flying with no prior experience and zero risk. Developed and tested with professional wingsuit jumpers, you will feel as if you are actually flying. As a pre-launch exclusive, we are offering a limited number of discounted jump packages on our website. Click the link above or below and come join the Jump Squad.
Well, that was a different video, but that one's also good.
Okay, well, first question actually I want to ask, kind of following up to that. You mentioned already in your previous comment that kind of what you're seeing people, like the repercussions of people coming through, like your increase in creativity, they go in adults, they come out kids. What other things are you seeing as they go through this hyper reality experience? Like what else are they experiencing?
I really liked what we were talking about, or what was being mentioned in the last, talk about risks and things like that. And I'm always thinking about why would a person want to do this. And one of the things that I identified with the hyper reality simulations that we were creating is something was going on, right? Something inside of the experience was happening, and through the benefits that I've gotten on being an entrepreneur and getting to meet really fascinating people, including neuroscientists and psychologists, we started spinning on like what's happening inside of the void experience. Like, why is this a thing? And you guys can look up like VR fails, and you'll find lots of videos of people running into the wall or jumping through their televisions. And it's funny, but if you actually look at what's going on in those experiences, they are seeing something that looks completely artificial. If you know what Archie's plank is, like the thing looks like a total video game, not real, but yet a person will put on a VR headset and within a few seconds believe that they can not only fly or that they'll be safe when they fly, they'll jump through their television. And if you put that into perspective, is if I invited any of you to come up on the stage, I'm like, I'll give you $500 to put your hands behind your back and fall onto your face. I don't think you could do it. Like, I don't think, like, physically you would allow yourself to do it. And so something really interesting happens in a virtual reality, or not even virtual reality, but when you implement physical senses that allows your body to get into what I call, and what others have called, like a flow state, in a dream state where you're hyper present. And I think that's what we have defined as with Jump is, if you have somebody in a hyper present state, in flow state, that's when you do the best work. That's when you are at the highest performing, maximum potential of your effort, is when you're in flow state. And so if you can teach an individual in flow state, like that would be unbelievable.
That's amazing. I've actually totally experienced the VR. I think I almost broke my cousin's VR set because we were doing the boxing game, and I ended up punching the wall. So, but
Yep.
Really interesting. The next question, kind of leading into that, is obviously you are very heavily focused on the user experience. I mean, it seems like that's your main focus, is you want to help people really jump out of their current reality and jump into something that's they may never experience. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever, my wife just gave birth, so I don't know if I'm ever going to go actually jump in a real squirrel suit. But in this question, I just want to say, so the magic in your customer experience comes when the customer believes what they're experiencing. What advice would you have for other businesses about customer experience? Like, what advice would you give about focusing on that experience for customers? And obviously, different businesses focus on different, segments. But
I think that's dependent on the type of business, but overall, we try to focus on, sometimes people say your experience, your business starts when they get your product, or it starts when they walk through the front door. And my perception is it doesn't start there. It starts when they first see the first thing that they ever do on your product. Their experience should start at the moment that a person opens their mouth and talks about what you're doing or what your product is. And that's when their experience starts. And then once they go through the whole process, if you've been able to curate a flow for them to progress through that, whatever your product is, I think you'd be a lot more successful. And that's, considering all kinds of variables that the person could be going through, and how your messaging is, and how one step kind of dovetails right into the next step. With hyper reality simulations and what we're doing with Jump, we're considering not only like the customer journey as it typically is defined, but also like potentially psychological triggers within the experience that would amplify the result.
that's amazing. What other kind of pivots have you made in the user journey as you've kind of experienced and put people through the hyper reality experience?
I think pivoting and mitigating risk is like what they were talking about before is you have assumptions, and you need to make sure that you validate those assumptions with data as soon as possible. Like, write them out, and then as soon as you possibly can, validate those assumptions with data. And we did early on testing with our ticketing. And we validated some things. For instance, most virtual reality things that are location-based is like, hey, here's $20 and sit in this little chair thing that does circles, and you'll go on a roller coaster ride, right? Jump is taking quite a few steps out of, hey, virtual reality is for video games and techies and nerds that have extra money to buy a VR headset, to fight zombies, to No Jump is actually potentially a new version of I don't know how to say it, but like experiential learning almost inside of a belief system. So we've done some things to kind of validate that, and we'll continue to do that. And we were still pivoting. I think you just keep pivoting, especially with your messaging. You have to just continually pivot and change your messaging. But we're trying to validate to resolve that. We're trying to validate our pricing. To do this in reality costs thousands of dollars. You have to buy your own equipment. At the end of the day, you have to throw yourself off of a cliff, and hopefully you survive. Like there's the death barrier. So we think that the value that we're providing is a lot higher than anything else. And so we're charging more for our tickets. We're charging a bit more that's comparable to other physical experiences, like even jumping out of an airplane or going on a zip line or jumping off the stratosphere in Las Vegas. It's comparable to those in the market, but we are pushing the envelope on what people will pay for a virtual reality experience.
I asked you at the beginning, actually, you said you have a friend who's a professional, like does professional squirrel jump. Has he actually been through the machine and actually tried it?
Yeah, he has.
What was what was his response?
I have an awesome video of him actually going through the experience. It was very critical for me in this whole process to make sure that we had a completely authentic experience. And my friend Marshall Miller, he's Utah local guy. He's a professional wingsuit jumper, base jumper. He's done over 10,000 jumps, and I took him out. And it was funny when I had him go through the experience because when he went through it, we didn't have the parachute mechanic done yet, so you couldn't actually pull your parachute. And I told him over and over, I'm like, you are going to crash because first you're using my wingsuit settings, which are based on physics, and I've never wingsuit jumped in my life, and so I don't know if it actually functions correctly. And then you can't pull your parachute, so you're going to go through the ground. It's okay. It's just virtual. But what was interesting is he jumped off, and he was flying for a few seconds, and he believed he was really flying. And when he didn't hit anything. He went through the surface mesh of the virtual world. He called it going in, and he's like, I always wondered what it would be like to go in, which means you hit the cliff and you don't wake up anymore. And he's like, now I know. And he like, he curled and he said a few choice words, and I thought I scarred him for life, but he came out of it fine. And those guys are amazing. Like what they do is incredible, and it's extremely dangerous. And I couldn't really understand why you would wingsuit jump more than once. Like if that was on my bucket list, and I'm like, I'm gonna go do that, and I figure out how to do it, and I get my wingsuit, and I prepare, and I go the 10 years it takes to actually survive and do something like this. When you jump off, and if I survive, like wouldn't I just check that box and just kind of be done with it? I'm like, I have 5 kids. I'm looking forward to being a grandpa. Like, why would you jump 10,000 times? He has kids. He has a wife. He kisses them every time he goes out to jump. I'm like, why would you do this? It wasn't until I first jumped and I flew and I had control and I pulled my parachute and my feet landed down that I realized why you would want to risk your life to do that over and over. It was really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we have Marshall Miller on, and then also Hartman Richter is on, and they're both professional wingsuit jumpers. Hartman is really unique because he's actually a really good programmer, so he's writing all the physics for the wingsuit, and they're telling us that we're 75 to 80% of the way there, and there's a path for us to get almost 100% there.
That is truly incredible. And how did you meet all these guys? Is this just part of your career? Or?
It's part of my career, and as an entrepreneur, and I talk about this a lot, I don't burn bridges with people. And my dad told me really early on when I started airbrushing when I was 12 and I started charging for t-shirts and things, he said the one thing, James, he said, your reputation will be worth way more to you than any money you'll ever make. And so I always kind of like had that as my mantra or whatever. And so I don't burn bridges. You never know the person that you're working with or the person that you're introduced with, if they'll be able to help you in the future. And it's just always good to have that. And so that's probably the thing that I hold like near and dear is my reputation. I and that's why people will trust what I'm doing and be excited about it and building those teams. And so over the years of creating video games and virtual reality stuff and programming, all these, and Marshall and understanding him and his group, like they just kind of collectively come together at a time where I have this crazy idea. I think we should build a hyper reality simulation where we base jump off of stuff. Those relationships kind of come to the table if you've been able to maintain those over several years.
Beautiful. What and I'm assuming they all kind of have this shared vision, but what is your vision for Jump over the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Which one do you want? Because it goes all the way out to 20.
Yeah, let's start with the next year. Like, what do you see in the next year, and let's go to 5 years.
You'll see an evolution of Jump, and I won't dig into it too far. But the surface, there's lots of levels and depth to what Jump could potentially be. And the surface level is wingsuit-based jumping X Games. Yeah, it's really cool, and I've always wanted to fly, and that's very surface level. And we start pulling back the layers of that. You start looking at things like what separates an individual from being a high performer, and a lot of that is the fear barrier, a fear of actually creating a business and starting something, the fear of failing. That's what separates high performers from average people. And so if you look at what Jump could potentially be, and our hypothesis is if you had experiences where you were faced with a fear barrier and you were able to jump past that and see success, that you'd be able to correlate that to other things and be able to overcome that. So as far as my vision goes, I think we are seeing in technology a belief system, a new education system. It will train people at a very deep level instead of just text and watching things on screens. And I like to put it this way, and nobody has disagreed with me yet. If I say you are the equivalent of all the experiences you've had to date, people are like, yeah, probably that's very true. Like everything that good or bad that's happened to me has created who I am today. So the idea is, what if you had the ability to curate an experience when you were younger that gave you a different perspective? Like, who would James Jensen be now at 46 if I would have had more knowledge of an experience that I had when I was younger? And I think that's the biggest opportunity with what Jump could potentially represent in the market, is a huge shift.
Really cool. I'm going to jump back to something you just mentioned about just some of the key barriers. We talked about barriers, like mitigating barriers. What other barriers have you found throughout the process of building the Void and also building Jump? Like, what are some of the big barriers you've had to jump over as an entrepreneur? How do you mitigate those?
Specifically with virtual reality, and it's probably with a lot of different things, is this, there's a lot of noise in the market when it comes to products and differentiating yourself from things. Most people, if they're like, hey, do you want to go do this VR thing? Like, I have this cardboard thing I put my cell phone in, and I'm not into VR, right? It's like, and some of the funny things is some of these events are like, I'm like, hey, I have this VR wingsuit thing, and I would love to be part of your event and stuff. And like, oh, that's great. Could you set it up in the corner and show it off? I'm like, no, it's like 17,000 pounds and it's bolted to the ground. I'm not bringing it. So it's differentiating yourself. I think it's hard with messaging and trying to make sure that your messaging is created in a way that allows a person to understand what it is that they're going to be purchasing or buying, and how it differentiates. It's really tough, especially when there's a lot of noise like that.
Thank you. I just had, this is kind of a random question, but I'm sure you get to hear all kinds of funny experiences about weird things happening at the Void when people are going through, and having any fun stories from your perspective that I think people would want to hear about.
Yeah, just going back to VR fails, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a lot in the Void early on, things that you could visually, we didn't think that people would do inside of the experience, or you had to be, we learned very quickly that you had to be careful on what things you put in the simulation that looked like they were sturdy. Because if you got off balance or something, there was a stack of rocks and you went for those, you would go onto the ground. You go really quick, and that's what kind of fascinates me with some of these VR, location-based VR companies that are doing open world stuff, but there's no physical aspects to it, because a person, like we've seen online, they go very quickly into, oh, this is real. So this wall's obviously real. And if they're scared or in a heightened emotional state, they'll completely believe that it's real, and then they'll just dive onto the ground, or go through a wall, or try to sit down on something. And one specific experience, we had a NASCAR driver that came out and went through the void early on, and at the end of the experience, I would stop people, and then I would turn around and turn off the simulation. And I stopped him, and I went to turn around and turn off the simulation, and the developers had made this other area look like there was stairs that went up to an exit, or went around the corner. And when I stopped him and I turned around, he saw the stairs and got spooked and ran for the stairs. And there was no stairs in reality, there's just a wall. And he took a whole face full of mask and cut up his nose. He had to get on TV the next day for an interview. But the funny thing was, he was a good friend, so he didn't press charges or anything. But he walked into the conference room after, and his wife was there, and he was like, "This was so real. It felt like I really hit my face." He's bleeding down his face. Yeah, funny story.
That's awesome. Excuse me. Here in a couple minutes, actually, we're going to turn it over to the crowd to let everybody kind of ask. But I have a couple last questions I wanted to ask. So this is one, but if you could go back to the beginning of doing something differently, go back to the beginning of your business experience, your entrepreneur experience, what would you do differently? What are some of the things that you wish you could change?
I think I wish somebody would have told me that owning a business is a learning experience, and you'll learn a certain version of a business at a certain level, but there's several levels. It's a very different level when your company's worth a couple $1 million versus your company's worth 500 million or even billions of dollars. There's different players that come into the room when that much value is created, and you have something that's amazing and something that people want. There's different personalities that come into that, and so having your company set up correctly in the very beginning, that's one of the things I like about RevRoad, is they really are passionate about allowing their creators to maintain some control, which is very important in executing the vision of a company. That can get kind of tossed to the side when other personalities come in and oh, this is an amazing thing, and we don't need these people, and we can manufacture these and make billions of dollars. They justify a lot of things. It's nothing against them, it's just normal business stuff that I found out, but I wish somebody would have told me that was something that happened. It might have made my learning experience be less painful. But I know now what that's like, and I know how to set up a company early on to make sure that cap table stays in the structure that needs to, and the contracts and agreements stay in those structures to maintain enough control to be able to see the vision all the way through.
That's amazing. And I guess on top of that, it's very unique because you have a multinational company, right? You're outside of the United States. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs that are looking to branch outside of the United States? And kind of along those same lines, I mean, what tips would you give?
I think that one of the unexpected things, if you've ever watched the movie The Founder, that's a good movie to watch. Because you have a product and it's your baby, and and you watch people come in and they experience it or they purchase it and they enjoy this thing, and you want to maintain that across the board. But it's very different wherever you go, and it's harder to maintain that when you go internationally even. And so the best results that I've seen is to have a facility or place that you can bring your general managers to and teach them the culture, teach them why they're doing the things that they're doing, and train them in an area where that culture exists, instead of just signing up people and maintaining that customer experience is probably one of the hardest things you can do when you go, not even internationally. I mean, our second location was in New York. And New Yorkers, they don't treat people like Utah people treat people. It was funny to, and just the people in general, they change. And so where we wanted really friendly assistance and putting equipment on and taking off equipment with a void, they don't do that as much in other areas. So there's also, when we launched out in Dubai too, there was a lot of things like, a man couldn't, touch a woman or do anything, and a woman, it had to be same-sex to be able to put on equipment, and we had to change some things in the experience because of colors that represent certain things. So being able to be flexible in that, but I think maintaining the customer experience is one of the things that you need to consider when you are going internationally, and what's the best environment to train people in to educate them on the culture and that experience.
Love that. Thank you. We're going to turn it over to the crowd now, to our audience. But what questions do we have? We're going to do some Q&A real quick. So questions, yeah.
Yeah, so Oculus over Christmas break, New Year's, it was the #1 downloaded app on the App Store. And so people are getting to know VR, what VR is, and what the experience is like. But Jump being hyper immersive, it's a completely different experience than Oculus. So are you trying to market that with customer testimonials, or is it just something that you know is completely different and people will experience, and so you don't try to differentiate Jump with the norm VR?
Yeah, we'll absolutely differentiate ourselves when you start seeing videos of people doing this. You'll see 16, 17-year-old kids that can't even qualify to jump out on an airplane. I think you have to be 18 to sign up to do that post a video of them jumping the Tiananmen Mountains in China in a wingsuit. And it will look completely photorealistic, and their friends are like, "What? You went to China and jumped the Tiananmen Mountains?" It's like, no, it's in Bluffdale. So differentiating ourselves, I think what you'll see also too with the Jump experience is people's testimonials that pair with those posts. We're hopeful that those are, hey, this was really a life-changing moment. Like, I have always been scared to do something like this, and I had this opportunity. With at-home virtual reality and the way that that's coming about, I think there's huge opportunities there for, it's just a sea of opportunity for digital creation of worlds and being able to educate people on why virtual reality is important. I've always said that one of the reasons why VR hasn't been massively adapted is because it's not very meaningful yet. We need to make a shift. It needs to be meaningful. Like, I have a $1,000 phone that I carry around. Who would have thought I was going to have a $1,000 phone? I have a $1,000 phone because it's meaningful. It helps me. It helps me organize my life or whatever. Once virtual reality turns into something that's meaningful, you'll see mass adoption. If it stays in the video game world and you're fighting zombies, it's not going to be massively adopted. Hopefully I answered your question.
From a marketing standpoint, like Marshall Miller working for GoPro, video is big, and a lot of people will go out and do these high adventure, high risk things so that they can share it, right? So will you be having some sort of video, like you were saying, the 17-year-olds will be sharing it as they jump? Will it just video the whole thing and then somehow import to social media?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
When you jump, since we're inside of a game engine or a world engine, which I think they should lose game engine because it's not that anymore. We have the ability to put cameras everywhere. So we can have drone shots, we can have proximity cameras that turn on as you fly by stuff. Since our experience is completely dynamic and you're flying anywhere you want, all of those look unique. So it's not a predetermined video that they get, it's actually them doing it. And that's one of the things that is really cool about what we're doing with Jump is it's an open world dynamic. So it's the equivalent for people that are asking me, do you think people are really gonna do this more times than just once? And I said, well, do people buy snowboarding equipment and go to Park City every year and bypass? That's what it's like. We're digitally capturing these amazing places in the world, and you can think of them as resorts where there's black diamonds and blue diamonds, and you go down one run and you see your buddy do a jump off something. You're like, I want to do that next time I come down. So those are the types of videos that you'll get from the experience.
Cool.
Yep.
Sounds amazing.
Okay, question about the technology side of things. So how do you find, you mentioned like one of the guys that jump professionally, he's like, does all this physics stuff or whatever. So how do you, with this being so new, how do you stay on top, and what do you do to kind of, I don't know if you're just connections in the industry because you've been in it so long, or where do you recommend we go to stay on top of that, and where do you see that kind of becoming more of an everyday, because you said it's meaning, right? So how do you see this technology becoming more useful? I guess 2 questions in one.
That's a really good question. From my from my perspective, where things get more meaningful is when it's more personalized for you. For what Jump is doing, when you have that experience where we're recording everything that you do, we're basically recording some of the decision making that you're doing at the edge of your fears, and then you jump, right? And then we can use that information to help you overcome all kinds of other things, potentially. It's a hypothesis. So I think there needs to be more information gathering and ways for people to opt in to be able to share that, to have personalized experiences. As far as like staying on track of the new tech that's going on, it's everywhere. Like this is like the wild, wild west right now with Bitcoin and the blockchain and virtual identities and, I don't want to say the metaverse word because everybody's throwing that out everywhere, but since Zuckerberg said it, but that's a future, right? That's my digital presence of James could potentially be even more valuable than my physical, which is kind of weird to think, right? Because in the physical world, I can answer a survey and it's only kind of a version of James, or I can participate on a social media site and it's like a version of James, but there's a real future where when you're putting all of this equipment on, that it kind of knows you as an individual and can help you through things. So I think the future there is just unbelievable.
Go ahead. Somebody else? Oh. So kind of to piggyback that, with virtual reality, I think when we think of like Facebook and what Facebook and Instagram has done from maybe some of the negative side effects that I believe the founders had no idea were coming, with a lot of the psychological and emotional damage that I think now there's data that kind of shows this. Are there concerns with VR and some of these side effects that maybe we don't see right now that might manifest themselves later?
Absolutely. And I personally feel like we have amazing tools and we're using them really bad. Social media is an amazing tool to be able to connect to people. Unfortunately, it's been used in a way to get profits and keep people's eyeballs on the screens, right? And not for the best purpose. But that technology is important, and it's a part of our evolution to be responsible and have, take that responsibility seriously and build experiences that use that technology to better a person, right, and to help them. And hopefully that's a shift that we see over the next little while, but there will always be kind of that yin and yang of technology. I always like to say I could have easily been a billionaire like several years ago if I had less moral values, but that's something that's always top of mind, right? It's when I did the Void, I sometimes would say I feel like a little kid wielding a gun because I don't really know like how this is impacting people, right? But you have Steam out there that's launching virtual reality simulations that feel very real to a person, and we don't know how that affects a person, right? Psychologically, it will only be until we start measuring what's going on and how we can see that impact, and then start guiding that down a path, right? From my perspective, I think that happens in location-based virtual reality, location-based experiences, because we can apply a lot more technology that gives us information on how to create those experiences, right? Because if we have more data and analytics to look at, we can say, oh, well, these are the types of things that are meaningful, and we don't need this whole contraption to do that. We just need these few variables in order to make this a meaningful experience, and so now we can deploy that on a headset at home that people have.
I really like that answer. My question kind of branches off of the same topic. Just because thinking about VR, that amount of mental stimulation does not exist anywhere in the real world. So what kind of questions are you asking your team to prevent problems that could affect people's psychological well-being in the future?
Validating our assumptions as fast as possible with data. We think that this is a thing. Let's measure it as fast as we can and make sure that it's a thing, and make sure that we validate our assumptions as fast as possible. It's a scientific method when it comes to something like that. But these tools are out there for anybody to create a virtual reality experience doing whatever. And so I think it's that's why there's such a wealth of opportunity right now, because you could create experiences that are deliberate to yield a result. I really feel like there's a future where my grandkids will subscribe or be a part of something where there's a curriculum of experiences that yield a result. They do these 5 things in a sequence, these 5 experiences, and they'll have this understanding. I mean, it's not that far-fetched, right? If I was like, hey, if you went mountain climbing and you started your business and you did this thing, you would have the information and the knowledge on how to take this next step. In reality, we're just doing that in a virtual sense with potentially less risk in the physical world. Psychological risk is still there. It feels very real. It feels like you're jumping off of it.
I think we got time for one more question.
I'd like to go back to when you took your first investment. How did you know you were ready to take on an investor, and what route did you choose, like a safe or something like that?
We did a safe note because that was the document that set up the company the best way. I believe from my education in the real world of taking on investments, it was a good way, and our investor was open to doing a safe agreement. With the Void, we did our first agreements were a convertible note debt, and there's some weird mechanics when it comes to convertible note debt that not so nice people will do. And so I had a little bit of PTSD from that. So that's probably one of the other factors on doing a safe note. But our investor was amazing. He actually comes from the physical therapy side of things. So he has a lot of clinics, and that's how he's made a lot of his money. So there's a future where inside of a belief system and doing normal physical therapy stuff that you're showing a person they're doing better than they think they are, that could potentially speed up the recovery process through a belief system. So anyways, that was one of the reasons why what some of the vision that I shared with him on where this could go. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think also just wondering, like, how far along were you?
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I was probably 2 years into the development, and what I mean by development is concept sketches, presentations, actually talking to engineers on how to pull off some of this stuff, lining up budgets and timelines, and all of that has to exist. You have to create all of that to show your investor that you've mitigated as many risks as possible. Like, these are the people I'm working with. I worked with them in the past. This is how I'm creating all of this stuff. Here's our timeline. Here's our budgets. Here's how we're going to spend your investment and where it will get us to. Early on, I think it's important to tell your investors, this is the point it's going to get us to. It's not going to get us potentially the final product, depending on what you're developing, but to know, like, hey, we'll get here. And the reason why we want to get here is because it represents this. This is the story we can tell. These are the things that we can show. This is the minimal viable product that we have. And so there's a lot of pre-work that you want to do as much as possible to illustrate the vision and the product before you take on investment.
Sweet. Okay, we're going to wrap up here, and I'm actually going to take because I'm the one sitting up here. Yes.
One last question online from Chris.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, good.
He says, can you discuss how we can apply these customer experience lessons you've learned more generally into other types of businesses and experiences?
I think there's still some, there's absolutely some data and analytics that we need to gather for what we're doing with Jump that I'm really excited about. I think the customer experience, the definition of a customer experience will change over the next few years because so much technology is involved and there's a lot of data and analytics. And so I think looking at other products or environments or experiences are going to change quite a bit because we'll have validated information that says if you do this, this, and this, then your customer could potentially feel like this. There's a highly likeliness that your customer will be in this psychological state when they get to this position. So that's where I think it's relevant in the future to other businesses and things that will be created is some of the foundational things that we're doing could empower businesses to be more successful based on data. Is that a good answer?
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to take the liberty and ask what I think is the most important question you'll be asked here today. Have you played pickleball, and do you play pickleball? currently?
I do play pickleball.
All right. Okay. All right.
I
that's good to
actually
know.
played tennis a lot when I was a kid, and pickleball is even more fun because you're closer to the net and you have a conversation that's going on.
That's good. We'll
Yeah,
invite
it's
you the
nice.
next time we play. So.
Yeah, I'd love that.
All right, this is the last question that we ask all of our presenters. So this is, what is something fun that your success has allowed you to do? And then we'll wrap up on that question.
I think the funnest thing is just being able to be introduced to all kinds of diverse people from around the planet, being able to expand my network of people and get different perspectives. And one of the most rewarding things I've had is just seeing people experience what we've created in the past. You know, that's so rewarding to have somebody to create a product and see somebody have a good experience with that. I can't think of anything that's better than that. It's so fun.
Love that. Thank you so much. And thank you. Can we just get a round of applause for James? So I'm going to stand up and shake your hand real quick. This is a little gift
nice,
from
thanks.
our family to you. So thank you so
right.
much for, I'll take the mic real quick. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. And
thank you.
thank you again all for coming.